My name is Elena Harper, and for the longest time, I believed my life was nearly perfect. 3 years ago, after the sudden passing of my parents, I inherited a sprawling estate, a family legacy passed down for generations. At just 31, I felt a profound sense of pride and responsibility to preserve what they had worked so hard to build. A year later, I married Julian, a man who seemed like my biggest supporter. He was kind, understanding, and always assured me that we would honor my parents' memory together. We moved into the estate, and for a while, it felt like a dream come true. I thought I had everything, a beautiful home, a loving husband, and a bright future ahead. But things began to change. Julian became more controlling, starting with subtle suggestions. "Managing the estate alone must be overwhelming," he would say. "Why don't you let me handle some of the responsibilities?" I shrugged it off, thinking he just wanted to help. Soon, his requests turned into demands. One day, Julian finally revealed his true colors. He demanded that I transfer the estate into his name, arguing that it was only practical. When I refused, his calm demeanor cracked, revealing a side of him I had never seen before. "You're making a big mistake, Elena," he said coldly. "You'll regret this." I thought it was just an argument, a rough patch we could work through, but then Julian locked me in one of the upstairs rooms, claiming it was for my own good until I came to my senses. At first, I thought he was bluffing, until he entered the room holding a pair of scissors. "If you don't sign those papers, Elena," he said with a sinister smile, "I'll make sure you never show your face to the world again." He grabbed a lock of my hair and cut it, letting it fall to the floor. My heart sank as I realized the man I married had turned into someone unrecognizable. The sound of the scissors cutting through my hair echoed in the silent room. Julian stood before me, holding the strand he had just severed, his smile cruel and calculated. "Maybe this will help you make the right decision," he said, tossing the hair onto the floor as if it were meaningless. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I was trapped, physically and emotionally. The room had no windows large enough to escape, and the door was locked from the outside. He had even taken my phone. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, the very place that had once been my sanctuary. Each day, Julian would come into the room with scissors in hand and repeat his threat. "Are you ready to sign the papers?" he would ask. When I refused, he would cut off another piece of my hair. The pile on the floor grew larger, a stark reminder of how far things had spiraled. "If you don't agree by the end of the week," he warned, "you'll have no hair left. Let's see how you like facing the world then." The isolation was unbearable. I spent hours pacing the room, racking my brain for a way out. Julian controlled everything, the locks, the meals, even the electricity in the room. The man I had once loved was now my tormentor, and I couldn't understand how it had come to this, all because I refused to give him what wasn't his to take. I thought of my parents and the legacy they had entrusted to me. The estate wasn't just a piece of property, it was a symbol of everything they had built and worked for. Signing it over to Julian felt like betraying them, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. But I also knew I couldn't endure this forever. My resolve was strong, but my body was weakening. I had to find a way to escape, to outsmart him before he broke me completely. On the fourth day, as Julian entered the room, I noticed a glimmer of hope. The door was slightly ajar. I knew it was risky, but it was now or never. I had to act. As Julian stepped into the room, his usual smirk plastered across his face, I kept my gaze low, pretending to be defeated. Inside, my heart pounded like a drum. The door was ajar just enough for me to see the hallway beyond. This was my chance. "Have you finally decided to cooperate, Elena?" Julian asked, holding the scissors once more. He toyed with the sharp edges, relishing the control he had over me. I didn't respond immediately, allowing a few moments to pass as I feigned hesitation. "Maybe," I murmured, my voice trembling, not entirely from fear but from the adrenaline coursing through me. His eyes lit up, mistaking my act for submission. He stepped closer, leaning down slightly. "I knew you'd come around," he said softly, his tone dripping with false kindness. In that moment, I struck. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed the small stool near me and hurled it toward him. The surprise was enough to knock the scissors out of his hand and send him stumbling backward. Without waiting for him to recover, I darted past him and out the door. "Elena," he roared, his voice thundering behind me as I sprinted down the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the cold wooden floors as I made my way to the stairs. I knew I had little time before he caught up. My mind raced as I descended, scanning for anything that could aid my escape. The front door was locked, as I had feared. Then I remembered the spare key hidden in the antique vase near the entrance, a precaution I had set up months ago. Julian had never paid attention to such details, assuming he controlled everything. With trembling hands, I reached into the vase and retrieved the key. Julian's heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs as I fumbled to unlock the door. "You're not going anywhere," he bellowed. The lock clicked open just as he reached the bottom step. I yanked the door open and bolted outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of water. My heart raced as I ran toward the gates, knowing Julian was right behind me. Gravel crunched beneath my feet as I sprinted toward the estate's iron gates. My breath came in ragged gasps, and every muscle in my body screamed for me to stop, but I couldn't. Behind me, Julian's footsteps were gaining, his angry shouts echoing through the still night. "Elena, stop right now," he roared. I could hear his rage, but I didn't dare look back. The gates were so close, just a few more steps. My trembling hands reached for the latch, but it was stuck. Julian's footsteps grew louder, and I could feel his presence closing in. In a split-second decision, I grabbed a large rock nearby and slammed it against the rusty lock. It broke with a loud clang, and the gates creaked open just as Julian lunged toward me. I slipped through the narrow opening, using all my strength to push the gate shut behind me. Julian reached the gate and grabbed at the bars, his face twisted in fury. "You think you can run from me?" he snarled. "This isn't over." I backed away, my heart pounding. My hands instinctively went to my hair, clutching the uneven strands, a reminder of the humiliation I had endured. His words only fueled my resolve. It was over, for him. Without wasting another second, I ran down the empty street, the estate growing smaller behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a neighbor's house a few blocks away. Pounding on the door, I begged for help. The elderly couple who answered looked startled by my appearance, but their kindness was immediate. They let me in, and after catching my breath, I borrowed their phone to call the police. "Please help," I begged the officer on the other end. "I've been held captive in my own home." The police arrived within minutes, and I led them back to the estate. Julian, still fuming behind the gates, tried to play innocent. "This is my wife," he protested. "This is a misunderstanding." But the pile of hair in the upstairs room and the broken lock were evidence enough. The officers arrested Julian on charges of unlawful confinement, assault, and coercion. As they took him away, he glared at me. "You'll regret this, Elena," he spat. For the first time in months, I felt free. As the police car disappeared into the night, a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. I stood in the driveway of my estate, now eerily silent, and took a deep, steadying breath. Julian was gone, and I was free. The officers assured me they would gather more evidence and keep me updated on the case. Before leaving, one of them advised me to find a safe place to stay for a while. "Just in case," he said kindly. "We don't want him coming back here if he makes bail." I nodded, knowing he was right. The estate no longer felt like the safe haven it once was. I packed a small bag with essentials and made arrangements to stay with Harley, a close friend who had always been like a sister to me. When I called her, she didn't hesitate for a second. "Come over right now, Elena. You don't have to face this alone." Over the next few days, with Harley's unwavering support, I began piecing my life back together. I hired a lawyer to file a restraining order against Julian and begin divorce proceedings. My lawyer, Mr. Robert, was sharp and compassionate. "This isn't just about the assault," he said during our first meeting. "He tried to coerce you into giving up your property, your legal and rightful inheritance. We'll ensure he faces justice for every crime he's committed." As the days turned into weeks, I found solace in small victories. The bruises Julian had left on my spirit began to heal as I focused on taking back control of my life. I returned to the estate, but not before installing a state-of-the-art security system and hiring a caretaker to help maintain the property. It was my home, and I refused to let Julian's actions ruin it. In court, Julian tried to paint himself as the victim, claiming he had only been protecting me from making bad decisions. But the evidence was damning: the hair, the broken locks, and my testimony. The judge saw through his lies and handed down a fitting sentence: 3 years in prison for unlawful confinement, coercion, and assault. The court also ruled that Julian had no claim to my estate. His attempt to steal what wasn't his had backfired spectacularly. With Julian sentenced and the legal battles behind me, I finally began to feel a sense of peace. The estate, once a symbol of my parents' love and legacy, no longer felt tainted by his presence. It was mine again, and I intended to honor their memory by making it a place of renewal, not sorrow. I worked with my lawyer to ensure every detail of the divorce was finalized. Julian had no rights to the estate or any assets I owned. His manipulation exposed, his attempts to claim anything from me had failed miserably. But my journey didn't stop there. I made a decision to help me heal. I began transforming part of the estate into something meaningful. With the help of architects and planners, I converted a wing of the property into a retreat center for women recovering from domestic abuse. The place that once represented my darkest days now stood as a beacon of hope and strength for others like me. It was my way of turning pain into purpose. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, including the women who came to the retreat. Their stories inspired me, and in helping them find strength, I rediscovered my own. I also rekindled my passion for painting, something I hadn't done since my parents passed. Each stroke of the brush felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Julian had tried to take away. My paintings began to fill the walls of the estate, breathing life and color into a home that had once felt so empty. One quiet afternoon, as I was tending to the garden, a familiar voice called my name. I turned to see Harley walking toward me with a big smile on her face. "Elena, I brought someone who's been eager to meet you," she said. Behind her stood a man about my age, his kind eyes and warm smile instantly putting me at ease. His name was Alex, a friend of Harley's who had heard about my retreat and wanted to volunteer his time as a counselor. As we talked, I found myself smiling and laughing in a way I hadn't in years. Alex and I began working together at the retreat, and over time, our friendship blossomed into something more. He never tried to control or diminish me. Instead, he encouraged me to dream bigger and to embrace the strength I had always possessed. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my estate, looking out at the gardens and listening to the laughter of the women in the retreat, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The hopeful, confident Elena I had been before Julian was back, but stronger than ever. I knew life wouldn't always be easy, but I had learned to trust myself and to stand up for what I believed in. Julian's threats, his cruelty, and his attempts to steal my freedom had failed. I had not only survived, I had thrived. As I turned to see Alex walking toward me, his hand extended with that familiar, encouraging smile, I realized I was ready to embrace the future I had built for myself, a future filled with purpose, love, and the freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. One afternoon, as Alex leaned against the garden bench, his gaze fixed on the blooming roses I had planted earlier that spring, I felt a quiet curiosity about the man who had seamlessly become a part of my life. Sitting next to him, I broke the comfortable silence. "You never told me why you started volunteering here," I said. Alex smiled softly, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I suppose I haven't," he admitted. "The truth is, I know what it's like to feel trapped, powerless." I tilted my head, sensing the weight of his words. He sighed before continuing, his voice steady but tinged with pain. Years ago, I was married, he began. Her name was Sophia, and I loved her more than anything. But over time, I realized she didn't see me as an equal. She wanted control over my finances, my decisions, even my relationships with friends and family. I didn't notice it at first. I thought I was just compromising for the sake of our marriage. He paused, glancing at me, and then continued. But then things escalated. She started isolating me, making me feel like I couldn't survive without her. I listened intently, recognizing the pain in his words, a pain I had once known all too well. His story mirrored parts of my own, but it also revealed his resilience, the same resilience that had drawn me to him in the first place. As Alex shared his experiences, I realized how much we both had endured and how far we had come. We had found strength in our vulnerability, and together, we were creating something meaningful, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who walked through the doors of the retreat. In that moment, sitting in the garden surrounded by life and renewal, I understood that healing wasn't just about moving on from the past, it was about building a future worth living. Alex's presence reminded me that love could be a partnership, a source of encouragement and support. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of a happiness that wasn't tied to fear or control. Together, we looked toward a future shaped by hope, purpose, and the freedom we had both fought so hard to reclaim. I had no one to turn to, no one to talk to about it, Alex admitted, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. I felt ashamed, like I had failed as a husband. Elena's heart ached as she listened. She could see the parallels between his story and her own, the silent suffering, the courage it took to finally break free. One day, I finally found the strength to leave, Alex continued. It wasn't easy, but I knew I deserved better. After the divorce, I spent years rebuilding my life. When I came across the retreat you've built here, I knew I wanted to help. I wanted to be the person I didn't have during my darkest days. Elena reached out, placing her hand gently over Alex's. Thank you for sharing that with me, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. It's incredible how you've turned your pain into something so meaningful. Alex smiled, his gratitude evident. Meeting you, Elena, has reminded me how strong people can be, even when they don't realize it. As the days turned into weeks, Elena and Alex's bond deepened. They worked side by side, not just as colleagues but as two people who truly understood and supported one another. They shared stories, hopes, and dreams, building a foundation of trust and mutual respect. One evening, as the retreat celebrated its first anniversary, Elena stood at the podium, addressing a small crowd of women who had found solace and strength within its walls. This place isn't just about healing, she began, her voice steady and confident. It's about rediscovering who you are and realizing that no matter how hard life gets, you have the power to rise above it. The applause was warm and heartfelt, but what truly filled Elena's heart was the sight of Alex in the crowd, clapping with pride. After the event, Alex approached her, holding a small envelope. I wanted to give you this, he said, handing it to her. Elena opened it to find a note written in Alex's neat handwriting. The words read, "Thank you for letting me be part of this journey. Here's to building something even greater together, **. Tears welled up in Elena's eyes as she looked at him. Together, she echoed, knowing she had found not just a partner in her mission but someone who truly valued her for who she was. Elena and Alex continued to expand the retreat, creating a sanctuary for those in need. Their shared vision and experiences brought them closer, and over time, their friendship blossomed into a love built on trust and mutual respect. The estate, once marred by pain, now thrived as a place of hope and renewal. Elena had not only reclaimed her freedom but also built a life filled with purpose and joy. She found strength in her scars and love in the unlikeliest of places. One evening, as Elena stood on the balcony, watching the lights of the retreat glow warmly in the night, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her past no longer defined her, it had shaped her into the woman she was always meant to be. For that, she was deeply grateful. Her journey wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation, resilience, and embracing new beginnings. With Alex by her side and a community of women supporting one another, Elena had built a legacy of hope, one that would continue to inspire others for years to come.